not have a usable microphone today, so we'll all be doing our best to project. Today, our speakers will be talking about Juniper Ridge, a topic frequently in the news. As you know, parts of Juniper Ridge are in Bend and part is in the Deschutes County. We have speakers representing both the county and the city of Bend. It's a current concern for all of us, for people who are living there houseless, but also we're all very curious about the development plans at Juniper Ridge. So we'll be hearing about both of those today. Our first speaker will be Matthew Stuart. Matthew's a real estate director for the city of Bend and also oversees the city's urban renewal tax increment financing program. Prior to joining the city of Bend for a second time, he spent more than 10 years in Tucson and Phoenix, where he worked in real estate investment, regional planning and visioning, land use public policy, and eventually as a consultant overseeing the entitlement and development process on behalf of private developers for infill mixed-use commercial and residential developments. An alumnus of the University of Arizona, Matt also spent more than 5 years as an adjunct professor in the School of Geography and Development and Master of Real Estate Development programs, and teaching introductory development course and construction management course to undergrad and graduate students. Erik Kropp has been with Deschutes County for more than 13 years. He joined the county in November of 2007. Prior to joining Deschutes County, Erik spent 13 years with the city of Phoenix in various departments, including budgeting, youth and education, parks and recreation, personnel, and public works. Erik has a Master of Science in Policy Analysis from Penn State and a BA in Political Science from the University of California, Davis. So please welcome Matthew and Erik.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. If you can't hear me, just raise your hand. I can always speak louder. So I thought we would start kind of with the development of Juniper Ridge and give some background. It's kind of been a long process, but first I'd kind of like, Juniper Ridge is a very kind of umbrella term. It means so many things, and kind of like to kind of break it down a little bit, because we hear Juniper Ridge and sometimes you're like, well, where exactly is that? Is that city? Is that county? Is that north, east? We actually use Juniper Ridge a lot interchangeably, and sometimes we kind of get confused on what we're talking about. So just kind of divide up a quick map. Obviously, really Juniper Ridge is anything north of Cooley Road. So the county owns sort of further up to the kind of the northwest, where US 97 bisects. The city has kind of two parts. We've got about 500 acres that's within city limits, within our sort of urban growth boundary within our city limits, and then we have about another 1,000 acres that goes all the way up almost to the Tumalo interchange. And so often when we hear about Juniper Ridge, we kind of try to break it down even more. For those who are familiar with tax increment financing or urban renewal districts, the Juniper Ridge Urban Renewal District actually goes all the way out to US 20, where the new Costco is being developed. So when we often say Juniper Ridge, it's a vast area, but today we're really focusing on kind of the area within city limits, and then sort of the county land and the city land kind of to the north. So I'll talk about development, and I'm strictly discussing sort of around what's within the city limits, because everything outside the county is still urban agricultural zone, and we can't quite develop that yet. So again, two pieces. So we'll focus on the blue area within the city limits, and really this Juniper Ridge, how far back do we go? It's over about 20 years old when the visioning first sort of began for what was going to be, ideally, pre-recession, was a sort of office, medical slash OSU was originally intended to go there. There was a lot around sort of innovation for this area and sort of corporate headquarters and bioscience. As we've moved on, we've gone through recessions, we've seen market change, we've seen trend change. Those sort of goals have kind of morphed as we look at what is actually needed for Bend, the city of Bend, for the region, and how can Juniper Ridge serve that. So in about 2016, a group that were sitting with the Bend Economic Development Advisory Board sort of went to council and said, hey, we need to sort of re-jumpstart what's going on up there. The old vision is kind of preventing new development from occurring. We think you should form an advisory board and create some sort of work plan that kind of moves Juniper Ridge in a different direction to help address the goals for what we'd like to see here in the city of Bend. So what came out of that was a Juniper Ridge Management Advisory Board, which I do see a couple members here today who sat on that. And what eventually was adopted by council was a work plan for us sort of moving towards subdividing the land in Juniper Ridge that we could actually create something we could sell and that someone could come in and actually develop. So this is a little convoluted, but we really kind of divided it to 3 phases and kind of like working our way through. But at the end there, it's like we want to be able to plat, which is create the legal lots that we could actually sell. So it had CC&Rs on it, it had some other zoning. So we've kind of methodically worked our way to sort of undo some of those so we can actually open it up so it can serve more of our industrial, flex, and kind of office type users that would be using it. So where we're at today is we actually have kind of subdivided this 500, it's about 300 acres that remain, into about 8 large tracts that we can plan for the future. So each color kind of represents a new tract that we've developed. So if you kind of look, I don't have a mouse, but I'm gonna wander, so hopefully that works. We're all here. This area here, the dark kind of purple, that is actually the new city's public works campus. So our utilities, our streets and transportation, and our engineering are all gonna be moving up there at the fall of 2025. It's actually under construction if you'd like to go check it out. And we'll be relocating them up here to Juniper Ridge. Adjacent to them is actually, this property is actually Pacific Corp, Pacific Power. Their new regional headquarters for all of Central Oregon is being constructed right now too, and they're planning to move in sometime in 2025 as well. But if you're any familiar, you know Les Schwab's headquarters there, Stuart, which does agriculture. I was told they don't do pesticide. It's sort of like, how do we just have bugs move somewhere else sort of materials up there. But those kind of developments, and that's all, we've only really had about 4 or 5 developments going within the last 15 years. So we've been really slow in developing, and the idea was how do we get the rest of this land moving forward and addressing our sort of employment-based needs? Because right now, if you look at industrial markets, we really only have about 1% vacancy. We have a lot of needs for being able to, for businesses, especially local businesses, to be able to expand here in Bend. So that's our public works campus. On this west side here is an area that is identified for potential affordable housing, but we haven't really gone through and looked at what that really needs. And then the yellow, the red, the kind of the pink, the orange, and the turquoise, that was all areas that we've identified that we could then sell. And the green is sort of 50 years in the future. Because again, it's taken us 15, 20 years to develop 50 acres. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. 200 acres is gonna take us 40 years. So, you know what, we're gonna hold that back. And a lot of that has to do with where's the future transportation gonna go? Are we gonna do a future interchange to 97? Is there a way to get traffic out to Deschutes Market? So really we're kind of holding that back for future planning and moving forward. So again, really this is all being hopefully developed for employment-based needs here in Bend. So council, last year, we surplused, which allows us to then go off and sell land, 5 large tracts that total about 200 acres. And we've broken that down into 2 sort of RFP processes. So we just actually closed our first offering for a property last night. I'm not allowed to say we did get offers. I can't tell you how many or what they're for, but we actually got offers for this 100 acres of land. And so we'll be looking here as we move towards the summer, actually getting those agreements in place, selling that off to developers. They'll be required to build the infrastructure as part of that sale. So the roads, the sewer, and the transportation. And then they'll be moving forward with hopefully end goal is they'll be able to either subdivide that further and actually either build the buildings themselves or be able to sell to other people to be able to build buildings to help growing businesses in our industrial. And then once those kind of deals are done, we'll actually go ahead and bring the next 100 acres in. So our goal is to unload about 200 acres, put that in private hands, and that's kind of twofold. One, as a government entity, we are really bad at developing. It's not something we really do very well. We usually like to spend money elsewhere, like public safety, other services. So having that money available for us to go ahead and develop really often doesn't make sense, and we tend to be slow. So how do we move this into market hands, knowing that our end goal is to have places for people to work who are moving here and the new jobs to be able to come. And then a balance of that is to be able to have some sort of housing up there that helps those businesses be able to grow. And then lastly, we know once we kind of get in the private hands, that actually helps our urban renewal TIF district. So that those private individuals will pay taxes, we can then reinvest that money back into the infrastructure up here. So for us, this is kind of moving towards how do we get this in the private hands, be able to move forward with actually getting this developed and not getting away from like, what are you all doing in Juniper Ridge questions that we hear all the time. So kind of, I thought I'd just throw up this sort of timeline where we've been going and how we're at. So again, I mentioned we just closed our RFP. We'll spend the next 2 months kind of evaluating those proposals, and then we'll do another one. But kind of just we've been working since early 2023, and even this all kind of got drafted in 2020. So it's really been 3 or 4 years of work trying to get this to a point where we can move forward with new development. And I thought I'd briefly touch on what we've been trying to do is within the city for some of the houselessness solutions. So kind of just a summary of what's been done. In 2023, city-owned and supported shelters. So we own 3 buildings ourselves, and I'll walk through those. Provided over 58,000 nights of shelter for individuals, 104,000 meals, and supported 315 people moving from temporary to permanent housing. So we actually purchased, coming out of the pandemic, there were some funds afforded by the state that allowed us to purchase facilities so we could use those for sheltered housing. One was the Navigation Center. It's on 2nd Street, so near Bimart. And that is really sort of the operational navigation center where we do a lot of intake or people that are needing on a very short-term basis. So that has about 100 beds. The Franklin Avenue Shelter, that is the old Rainbow Motel on Franklin, just west of 3rd. So that is a low-barrier shelter operated by Shepherd's House. We have a lot of actually families there, and those who are in medical need are housed there. Then we were able to purchase another shelter. I believe it was the Bend Inn and Motel on Division Street. And again, another low barrier, but that's been allowed us to expand and create more units as well. And then we've got some other outdoor, so Cascade Villages and others kind of shelters. But in total, within the city, there's about 505 beds available, and they are all full. So we've moved. So as Erik kind of talks through what we're dealing with up there from the houses situation, we've been trying to coordinate with them as best we can to kind of manage that as well. So that was all I really had. I added some links, so if you do share this and you have any questions, please feel free to check those out. And then,
that was too fast.
sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. And then on the next slide is my contact. I don't have business cards for whatever reason, so if you really need me, I'll have my cell phone out there as well. And you can always reach out to me.
And just so you know, in the next issue of the Echo's newsletter, all of these slides will be attached.
Oh, good.
And I'm happy to answer questions for you. Yeah.
So, the map, are there, the red line.
Oops, sorry.
The red line around, are those already streets?
Sorry.
You can tell me what street?
Yep, so actually these kind of dashed color lines, those are the main streets.
Okay,
This red line it kind of denotes, this was all existing. So almost all of this is developed today. So we've got, this is Les Schwab, these plans are going through, this is all developed. So this kind of in here is what's existing.
so where you said housing,
Yeah,
what
what's
road
that?
is that?
This is this road, it'll be this road here.
And that's a new road that's not developed?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, not yet.
And what's the red line, the outside? red
It's
line?
just the boundary, sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
so not a road that's
No, not a-
existing?
no.
Okay. And are there homeless in any of those?
Right now, no.
Houseless?
No, so we're relocated, when we put in, so this blue line sort of navigates sort of north and over. That was the new North Interceptor sewer line that goes all the way across 97 that allows us to all be gravity fed. So when we did that line is about 30 feet deep in areas. There was a lot of blasting, so we actually were able to move people when we did that. So within here, we don't have any active camping going on. Sorry, in the
Yes.
yellow.
Can you just simplify what exactly you do? I don't clearly understand.
I love it. That's like, anyone seen the movie Office Space? The Bobs, what is that you do around here? Pretty much my job is anything that has to do with a real estate transaction comes through my desk. So acquiring land for the city, disposing of land for the city, any sort of lease agreement we have, any sort of transaction that occurs that has anything to do with land, title, etc. And then I oversee our tax increment financing, which is basically a reinvestment of the property tax dollars back into the area for certain projects. So we have got 3 within the city. One is the core area, one is Juniper Ridge, and then one is actually Murphy.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna, in the blank.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask a double question.
Okay.
At one of the meetings you conducted, there had been a traffic study done on Cooley.
Okay.
And it was said that 28 vehicles per hour came, and if you live anywhere around Cooley, you know it's all not,
Sure.
there are many times a
Yep.
day, it's much more than that. There's a concern on my part about what all these businesses, and I know you talked about other roads eventually.
Yeah.
But a concern about Cooley, and I'd like you to address that,
Okay.
and then also, yes, campers were moved out when the north intercept went in.
Yeah.
But there's a open gate behind
There is.
Cetera,
Yes.
and they have moved back in, and we've had
I know they've-
evidence of that.
I know they've gone up past, and so what, I'll start with your second question, I'll go to your first question. So, go to this map. So, that bisects, this sort of line that kind of bisects everything is the railroad. And so we have an agreement with the railroad to be able to access our property across those tracks. The railroad informed us that they would like us to close those gates. So as a result of having to lock those gates, there was no way to get from the west side to the east side, and that's what we were forced then to have an access point and open that gate to Cetera so that we could actually have a place for people to be able to exit from a liability standpoint. So the camps that I've seen, they're just beyond our city limit as they go across that sewer line. But I usually go out once a week, although I haven't gone out the last couple weeks. But I'll look into that. And then Cooley Road, the north interchange as part of ODOT's work, it's supposed to help improve Cooley. There is, and it's on the county's transportation plan, a desire to extend Cooley out to Deschutes Market. But really that's a 15 to 20 year kind of project based on that. So we're kind of 18th moving south and Cooley West are the two access points onto the parkway. They're in
the state of emergency over homelessness required the city to identify city property that could be used to shelter houseless people. And part of that study, the city found that there was about 100 acres in Juniper Ridge that was possible for that and very little else.
Yeah.
Is the city done anything other than say, yes, there's 100 acres here? Is there any planning for that?
So we've actually, the CHR, Coordinated Housing Response Office, which is made up of county, city, part.
The four cities.
Four cities, yeah. They've been meeting to address kind of the governor's issue of identifying parcels. So we actually went through recently and submitted a letter identifying other properties within the city that could possibly, I think there's a misconception of how much land the city actually owns that's not for critical infrastructure like utilities and water and things like that, which sort of limit our ability to have other uses based on the fact that those come from grant funding from federal, which tends to restrict what can go with property. So as part of that, we did offer other alternatives. We do have a site south off of 3rd Street. We did surplus as part of recently a parcel along Southeast 9th Street near the high school and the middle school that we previously looked at, but we've gone back and said, let's go ahead and sell that. That can be used for housing to sort of help address it. And then we did submit Juniper Ridge again as an option. However, the struggle we have there is we have to get access to it. So we don't have the roads in Juniper Ridge to be able to get to those sites, nor is Juniper Ridge have ideally located for a lot of the services being provided. So we did identify and went through the whole city, and I know they're working to identify parcels within each jurisdiction's limits, and worked, correct me if I'm wrong, we're working towards a RFP for a service provider to then be able to sort of create some of that more permanent camp shelter sort of situation on some of those parcels that we've identified.
But you don't have roads for business development there either, right?
Correct, so part of the sale is the developers will have to build the roads as part of it. So we don't inherit that cost. The gentleman in the back, and then I'll work my way.
What are your plans for the other 1,000 acres of Juniper Ridge? And what are you doing to mitigate wildfire there in the meantime?
Yeah, what are our plans? It's probably more of a policy discussion with some counselors, but until as we go through each UGB and expansion sort of discussion, we look at this as this an area we should be expanding. I think there was, when we say acquired loosely from the county many years ago, there was a perception of how fast the city would grow. And I think I was hearing earlier, we're talking about land use. I think that's an important topic, is how much should the city grow to address the population, and how much should that be north to Juniper Ridge? So in the short term, there isn't a plan for what we're gonna do with that land. At least no one's conveyed that to me. For as far as fire mitigation, we've cut new roads through there. We work with COID to make sure that they have access on their canals, and we do access roads. Working with the sheriff's office and others, we do actually try to get training, or even some of the work programs through our the jail and other kind of programs to go out there and help do clearing. And then working with our fire department, we're often out there kind of identifying places that we can go. We would like to, and it's on my task, to create a new access point off of Deschutes Market to kind of give us, but again, as mentioned, it's a double-edged sword. If I create better access, I could encourage additional folks, and I try to weigh that carefully in terms of what we do. Now if you were first, then I'll go there, and I'll come there. How about that?
I had heard rumblings quite some time ago about City Hall.
We can't hear you, could you speak up?
I heard some time ago about the City Hall maybe moving somewhere. Is
No, we're looking at moving our public works teams, which are transportation, our utilities departments. City Hall, we're actually looking at, it's probably the worst kept secret, but we're looking at moving it into kind of the central district. So in between Franklin Greenwood, the Parkway, and Third is sort of what we've been evaluating. And we've acquired a couple properties in that area, but we're nowhere near like our planning stage for anything like that. It's still preliminary, but no, not for Juniper Ridge.
and that's a lot of industrial land.
It's identified as industrial land within our zoning code, but I think what we've seen a lot is industrial land tends to be a lot more what we call flex space. So if you think about up here in the northwest section, you've got Hydro Flask and you've got the coffee. So they tend to be folks that need space, small space to manufacture, and actually, but also have a component that's interactive with the public. So we sort of envision there will be some who are larger industrial, like the Public Works campus, the Pacific Power, but ideally the smaller scales are gonna be a very much kind of interfacing sort of small scale businesses looking to go from 10,000 feet to 20 to 30,000 feet as they move up the scale.
So with the industrial land in Redmond, it kind of seems like it's really going full bore,
Yeah.
developing. It seems like, you know, that having good quality industrial land is important to Bend's growth as well.
It is. I think when we look at it, when we compare ourselves to Redmond, our land value tends to be a little bit higher than Redmond. So I think we're kind of looking more towards the smaller users that are a little more boutique, whereas Redmond, with their scale and their large lot kind of setup, would be more towards the larger 100,000 square foot user, someone who needs, 50 acres. We really haven't had anyone come to us and say, I need 50 acres to build something, just because of our pricing, our infrastructure. So we're kind of looking for, how do we help the smaller businesses grow that want to stay in Bend? We do have biosciences looking, and again, those are high paying jobs looking to stay within the city limits.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'll come back to you, sir.
So I was wondering, I know with the first store that was purchased on 2nd Street, that was an expedited, or correct me if I'm wrong, an expedited project. It moved more quickly through the bureaucratic process due to the extreme need, is that correct?
Why am I forgetting the program name?
Yeah.
We bottle it, what do we call
Turnkey?
it? Turnkey, there it is, sorry. That was my gap when I left the city and came back. Project Turnkey was authorized by the state legislature and the governor during COVID, and that allowed for state funds to be used to help expedite the purchase of the buildings to turn them into shelters. I believe we used the turnkey funds for the property owner division. I think council went ahead and authorized using city funds for the navigation center and for Franklin. I don't think we used that program for that.
So the shelter that is by Mart?
Yes.
City funds?
I believe so.
And that was expedited quickly because of the extreme need?
I Yeah, and it already had the
Okay.
Shepherd's House was already operating in there,
Yeah,
so from that standpoint, we just assumed the agreements in place.
Okay.
We weren't doing as much sort of. There wasn't as much due diligence
So I
involved.
guess my question would be, and what I'm hearing is, so where I'm coming from is I do work with the unhoused population in a low
Great.
barrier level.
Yeah.
And have for quite some time, and so as you were talking about all of the beds being filled and the extreme needs, if there is an avenue to expedite things
Yeah.
in a way, there is what I'm hearing, a little bit more
In a sense.
quickly than,
Yeah.
I hear that.
I mean, and I think we can always shorten closing periods, and I think if we got that direction from council to move, we often do.
Sweet.
When we worked on the Project Turnkey, we were looking at another property that through our due diligence needed a lot of improvement and work, and that was a hard step to go to them and say, like, this isn't a right investment, we need to turn and look
Yeah.
elsewhere. And again, addressing like, we're on a time crunch to try to get that done as fast as possible. So
There's a lot.
I think
Yeah.
you should ask counselors, not me, we're not
Well, that's-
policymakers,
yeah.
but yeah, if they tell me to make it a priority, that's my priority.
Do you want a glass of water?
No, I'm okay, I got my water here. I'm just horsey all the time. Sorry.
Yeah, it's
But you
for what
reminded
what you're talking about, it sounds like some of the businesses that want to develop in there and come in and develop are from Deschutes County or
Yep.
from Bend, and others are from not local, they're either other places in the state or other places in the country. Do you have any idea of proportion of which ones are local and which ones are from some other state or from?
We see significant pressure from those that are local just because of the current industrial spaces we have today.
Yeah.
We actually have a lot of our businesses that are sort of startup here, entrepreneurial, or they are running out of space and can't grow. And so we definitely are feeling that's, Jim was part of that. We did a market analysis when that work plan was being developed, and it really was the big businesses looking to relocate from a state. They're not really looking at Bend per se. There might be a few. What we really needed was, we've got businesses that can't grow, there's nowhere for them to go, so now they're being forced to look outside of Bend. So how do we address that? And again, it's a perfect example, District 2, Northwest, having this kind of flex office space where if you want 5,000 feet, good. If you need 10,000 because you're growing, you can get now 10. We don't have many options for that. So when we kind of set this up, so we're looking for master developers that could come in, build multiple buildings, and have that kind of scalability for someone to be able to stay and grow. Because there's not a lot of users who need 50,000 feet here. We have a lot that actually need 20,000, which you don't really need a whole lot of land to do that. But
Thank you.
yeah, I'm gonna start man in the back and then in the purple.
Well, this is back to housing.
Okay.
I spoke to some public function of a member of the Bend board, and
Okay.
I said to him, why is it that we issue all these housing permits
Sure.
for developers, and there's nothing available for housing for assisted housing on any level?
Sure.
And his answer was, well, they wouldn't be able to make any money if we did that.
Oh,
So what I
sounds
wanna
like
know is, how does the person who feels that a school teacher or a nurse
Yeah.
ought to be able to live in Bend, how do you insert yourself into that process so that we change that from these developers aren't able to make as much money as they want?
Yeah.
To we need levels of housing, middle income, not just affordable.
Yeah.
The whole, so,
Sure.
are you the guy?
And it's being recorded, so I'll just extend that a little bit longer. No, but yes. No and yes. I'll say no. Talk to the counselors. Talk to everyone. They set the policy. So every 2 years, when we have new council members, or they put together a 2-year council goals, and those are again priorities and policy priorities for staff to sort of give us direction on what we're supposed to do. Are we running out of time? I know. Got air. Okay. The short version is they've prioritized affordable housing. So we've surplus 2 properties that we own, and again, we don't have a whole lot as the city, so we're trying to do what we can. We put a third on a market that we're trying to encourage housing that's not necessarily condos and market rate, but you know, there's two forms of thought. There's building of any housing is good because it means older housing or anything can reduce in cost. And then there's how do we specifically address that? We have legislation that's gone through that encourages using exemptions and incentives for middle income housing. We have some legislation that's looking to go through for ADUs. I'm not going to speak about our legislation, but things haven't gone as planned over the last couple of years in getting things approved there. So we are also at that beck and call for the programs to come in place to help us work through kind of the process. So your state legislator, counselors, that's who we keep I encourage you to keep talking to. My job is I then try to create the program with the dollars we have available to get you there. So we recently paused what was called MUPD. That's the acronym. It was multi-unit property tax exemption. And the idea was a developer will get a 10-year exemption for building new housing. And the idea was we really wanted to sort of jumpstart the central part of Bend to get more housing units there. And we have 4 applications, 2 have been approved, 2 are pending. But we've also decided to pause that as we look at other ways we can incentivize other types of development. So it's something we're constantly working on. But again, our incentive, what we can offer as a local government is only the taxes that we get. So we're kind of limited. And when a developer comes and says it doesn't pencil, I can only help them so much. So it's a balance and a challenge. And there was one more, and then I'll give up my time, and then I'll let Erik go, and then we can talk. I'll be here. I'll stick around, I promise. Sorry.
Yeah. So I did a couple of questions first. Did I understand you to say that part of this 5 tracks is going to include residential?
This area, this light purple here, we are contemplating for affordable housing.
Ah, right next to the railroad track.
No.
No.
Well, this is Cascade Village.
Oh, okay.
And then this is all residential. So the
Okay.
railroad track actually comes this way.
Okay. And then my second question is, in the residential area, is there going to be room for like any green space, like a park where these?
Yeah, so the Parks Department recently built the North Point Park, which is just north of it. So that's their sort of regional park that they've constructed in there. I'm sure as any developer comes in, they will evaluate and probably put more in. We haven't contemplated what that looks like. It's sort of our next 12 months look at is moving that as we kind of evaluate our affordable housing.
So the city doesn't currently have codes relative to residential saying how much part of that?
You typically have to have an
acre has-
open space requirement, buffering,
Okay.
things like that.
Okay.
For those who live up there, the topography up there kind of dictates development, so I would imagine there would be some
Okay.
common
Thank you
areas
so
developed,
much.
yeah.
Are they covering the whole canal?
I know this section from essentially here all the way up for the north is fully covered, but I don't know what their plans are beyond that.
Like Amity or like,
I'm sorry.
like Amity's out to there, but then the whole canal all the way to Redmond. It's
Is-
partly covered in Redmond.
Yeah, so I think in between, so kind of just off the screen here to the north, there's a small hydro station that's set up. From there, further north, it's uncovered. From there south to really, it's just below here, it's all covered. Yeah, and I don't know what their plans are. Sorry, I know I'm taking all the time. Thank you, good question though.
Thank you for having me. I've lived here since 2007. A lot has changed. When I first moved here, these were actually made in Bend. Hydro Flask was made here rather than, now they're designed in Bend and made in China. Also, when I first moved here, I would go downtown and residents were excited to see tourists. So a lot has changed. We were all tourists at once, but a lot has changed since I've been here. I'm going to talk about the remediation plan at Juniper Ridge. I'm not going to talk that much about homeless policy or politics. If you want to talk about that, then you may want to invite elected officials or candidates for elected office. I'm a bureaucrat, so you're going to get the bureaucrat presentation today. But I will say that I have been in local government, this is my 30th year. Luckily, I've only worked for two, City of Phoenix and Deschutes County. And I will tell you that by far, this is the most complicated, frustrating, hardest, most political issue that I have worked on in my 30-year local government career. And I tell people, if you want to get humbled at work, go work on homelessness. And I'm not talking about going and serving people who are homeless in terms of at the Bethlehem Inn and doing the direct, volunteering your time. If you want to get humbled, work on homelessness, big picture policy stuff. Because I certainly have and do every day. I'm going to start out with just a couple of things about causes of homelessness. It's really the decline of those things, decline of affordable housing. We heard about that with questions today. Decline of public assistance and job opportunities. We saw, an increase in homelessness during COVID and continue to see that. Homelessness is also created by housing discrimination, domestic violence, inequities or inequalities. Other factors include disasters like COVID, personal hardships, family trouble, disability, job loss, mental health, and substance abuse. So those are all those factors that create homelessness, and everybody's situation is different. Just a snapshot of homelessness in Central Oregon. Every year there's a point in time count that the federal government requires through HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department, and there's a requirement for communities to count the number of people who are homeless at the end of January, essentially. And if you look at starting in 2017 with the point in time count, the number was just under 800, and then each year it has steadily increased. The point in time count has given us more information. People always want more data, and there's lots of follow-up questions based on the point in time count, but it's somewhat limiting. But what the point in time count has told us is that first-time homelessness made up 38% of those last surveyed last year. Also, 77% were living in Central Oregon before becoming homeless. And there's also a huge number of unsheltered homelessness in Central Oregon, of people living out on public lands. This year's point in time count is happening right now. I think it's a couple of day exercise, and then those numbers typically get released in the spring. So there's lots of information about the point in time count. You can go on the website of the Homeless Leadership Coalition, also people call it HLC. They have all of this information and all the data in slides. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about Juniper Ridge and the remediation plan. The land that I'm discussing, and this is similar to Matt's slides, but in orange is county-owned land, and then I'm talking about this triangle right here. It's a 50-acre piece of property. That triangle that I just showed you is 50 acres. The number of people that are living or camping, we don't know the exact number. Our best estimation is about 100 people, and it is zoned open space and conservation. That's the zoning of that land, which does not allow camping, and that's part of the issue we're trying to address.
Does it allow development?
No, it doesn't. So Juniper Ridge, I'm first showing you some pictures of what it looked like when we started, and some of these pictures are what it still looks like today. But we all know that there's lots of people who are living in Juniper Ridge and camping, which creates a lot of garbage. They don't have, people that are camping don't have trash service there, and so there's really no place for the garbage to go. So there's large amounts of garbage. There's what are called unauthorized camps. This one right here, you can see somebody took time, built fences, there's some structures. If you look closely, there's like an old RV and some tarps to prevent water from getting in. So some Some people are camping in RVs, and some have created camps like this. There's also makeshift toilets and showers. On the left is a little tent structure. That's probably either a restroom or a type of a homemade porta potty, or sometimes there'll be showers. When I went out and toured, I saw structures like this, or not structures, but tents like this, and then a water bucket, and that's used for showering. There's also lots of illegal dumping. I don't think this boat belonged to somebody who was homeless. I think it was somebody else in the community that dumped that boat, because I just suspect that. So there's illegal dumping going on. So what got us involved is the county received a code enforcement complaint. We receive code enforcement complaints every day. That's what we do. We get a code enforcement complaint, we look into it, and then if we verify that the property owner is violating our county code, we issue them a notice, and our goal is voluntary compliance. We do this every day. Well, we got a code enforcement complaint we the county got a code enforcement complaint on the county. So what did we do? Well, we treated it like any other code enforcement complaint. And the code enforcement complaint that came in said, hey, at Juniper Ridge, there's lots of violations going on. In fact, our code enforcement complaint that we issued to ourselves had 5 main violations. It said, and you can even read it online, we published it, we're local government, we said, here you go public. But we have unpermitted structures. You saw that camp that had the fences and the kind of the structure, so we have a number of unpermitted structures. We have excessive amount of solid waste. I showed you that picture. Also, RVs on property that are being occupied without a permit. So we have people living in RVs to protect themselves from the elements, but it's not allowed in our county code. And then we also have RVs and structures without a permit for disposal. Obviously, if you go to a camping site, if you have an RV, you either contain it there and go to a disposal station, or you hook it up there, and that's how you dispose of the waste. But at Juniper Ridge, this is not occurring, obviously. And then we have a land use violation because the way the property is zoned, we can't allow people to camp and live there. So we have those violations. So the code enforcement complaints goes to our community development department, and they issue it. And really it kind of goes from one department, it gets issued to another department, to our property management function, which manages county-owned property. So we said, okay, how do we fix this? We're a property owner, we're in violation, we acknowledge it, we've known about it. How can we fix these code violations? And we came up with a remediation plan, just like other property owners. Voluntary compliance, how can we fix this? It's not gonna be overnight, but what can we do? What steps can we take to eliminate those code violations? So the remediation plan, first of all, acknowledges the human element of this. People living there are in a difficult situation. It's human beings, it's our neighbors out there. There's an absolute human element at Juniper Ridge. The remediation plan also included a public notice to the people living there so that they will know what's going on. We, as part of our remediation plan, we pulled in our public agency partners, the city of Bend, because they own property right next to ours and actually have the same code enforcement issues. We also pulled in ODOT, community nonprofits, the Bureau of Land Management, because they own a lot of land in the northeast part of Juniper Ridge, and the irrigation districts because of their infrastructure at Juniper Ridge. So as part of the remediation plan, we said, okay, if people are putting garbage on the ground, don't have a place to go to the bathroom, things like that, I got a solution. We could put in dumpsters, porta potties, hand washing stations, and drinkable water. So that's part of the remediation plan, and I'll show you pictures of those items. We also included security patrols so that we had a presence out there. The media loved to talk about, oh, you're putting armed security guards out there, and I did a bunch of interviews with the media. And then we looked at some fire mitigation strategies, including handing out fire extinguishers to residents there. The remediation plan included cleaning up the abandoned camps. Many camps, people leave, they move for various reasons. So we wanted to first address those. That's the easier camps to clean up. At the beginning, the plan included requiring people to leave. We wanted to give them plenty of notice. And in Central Oregon, you want to plan around the winter. But typically you want to, if you're going to require people to move off public property, the more notice they have, really the better. Once people left, we were going to clean up the camps. We got the Board of County Commissioners to approve a budget of up to $200,000 to do all of this work. And we acknowledged that this was new to us, and we would likely need to change and pivot based on our experience. So that was the plan. I mentioned the plan was to require people to leave, and there's this meeting that I've been to that is a very difficult meeting. The meeting is with nonprofits to say, hey, we as a public entity need to require people to leave an area. And people that work for the nonprofits ask a question that's a very good question. And the question is well, where can we tell them to go? Where do we tell people to go? And yes, we can tell people you can go to shelters. We have the Bethlehem Inn, we have the Stepping Stone. Matt went over the facilities at the City of Bend. Those have been expanded, but oftentimes they are full, or sometimes people will not go to them for a whole host of reasons. And whether or not other people say, well, those reasons aren't good enough, I'm not here. I'm not here to comment on that or to judge people for not choosing to go to certain places. But it's very difficult to say, to be able to tell people where they can go if they're going to continue in a camping environment. So at the same time, we had the City of Bend doing the Hunnell Road relocation. We all saw and knew that Hunnell Road was a big problem. So the City of Bend was closing down Hunnell Road for very good reasons. So we were concerned about that. Also China Hat, that's another significant area. We received a letter from the U.S. Forest Service with concerns that if we closed Juniper Ridge, that people would relocate, some of them to China Hat, some of them actually further east in Juniper Ridge, including BLM land. We also knew that new beds were coming online. There's been lots of work to add different types of bed in our community. And really the concern was, and we've seen it, we've all seen it in Central Oregon, a public agency for very legitimate reasons closes one area and people relocate to other public lands. Yes?
I need to do this really quickly, I'm gonna be leaving, but the gentleman that was sitting next to me was Kent Vanderkamp from Kropp, Central Oregon Drug Enforcement, and he offered to connect with anyone that's concerned about fentanyl and the drug situations that are happening in the camp. He would like to have discussion around that and the safety of our people. So he had to leave because there was an emergency, but if you need to find his email address, it's super easy to find and a good person to talk to about solutions. He's very open-minded and thank you all for being here.
All right,
Yep,
thank you. So based on these variety of reasons, we decided not to require people to move off of Juniper Ridge, which is good and also makes it difficult. So in terms of what we did, this is Highway 97, and then you have the new J-turn up there, that's probably the best reference. We created 3 stations. You can see them marked on the map. And in fact, if you drive up to Redmond and look off to the right, you can see some of the stations. You can also see a lot of the camping going on. So we created 3 stations. First, we put up notices because we were going to put these there. We wanted to tell people who live in there what we're doing and why. So we went out and published these notices on a lot of the juniper trees. And this is what it looks like. It's funny, I've had many people come to me and say, you know, we need to treat homelessness like a public health issue. And we need to declare a public health emergency or you know, we need to look at it from a public health lens. And I've talked to our folks in public health and they said, great, it's pretty simple. That's what you do. You give porta potties, there's an ADA porta potty. This is the hand washing station. And then we have the drinkable water. Call it, if you're a local government person, it's potable water, but it's just drinking water. So that's what we have at Juniper Ridge. One service provider for I'm not sure how long, but he has a pickup truck and a big water tank on the back, and he'd use his garden hose to put water in there and then drive out to Juniper Ridge and deliver water. So he came to us and said, hey, can I, rather than doing that, can I use your spigot? We said, absolutely. The goal is to get drinking water to people that are living there, and if rather than you using your home hose and transporting it, if you want to use that, you're welcome to. As part of the remediation plan, we talked about cleaning up of the abandoned camps. We have a contractor called BioSolutions that the city also use. They're very good. They're very good at working in areas of people who are camping, people who are homeless. And even though they focused on the abandoned camps, they also hand out those yellow bags. And many of the people that are living there will put their waste in there, put it out so the contractor can take it away. Because the people living there, they don't want the waste in their camp either. They just have no place to dispose of it. I like this picture. I went out there and our dumpster was getting full. And I looked and I saw these. And you can't see it, but it's like encyclopedias, you know, Britannica.
Oh, geez.
And kind of like that boat. I was like, I don't think the people that are living there, I don't think this is from them. It might be from our other community members. And we actually talked about that. We're like, well, what do we do if somebody disposes of something? And we said, well, it's public land, it's public, and well, I guess it's better that it's there than it's out in the forest. I mentioned that we have a security patrol goes out, drives around, takes notes. If they see something that needs to be reporting, they do. If it's an emergency situation, they call 911. The day that I was out there, I went out with one of our sheriff's deputy on the right, and the other person works in our property management area. But there was a call from the security personnel saying that there's a fire smoldering. So our deputy went out to try to take care of it, and then called in Ben Fire to finish it off. So there's a benefit to having patrol out there. They don't engage with the residents unless the residents engage with them, but they're there just to kind of have eyes, and also things like this. It's really helpful to have their presence. Also, I went out with our host team, which is Homeless Outreach Support Team. They go out and try to provide behavioral health support to people who are homeless. Rather than expecting people to come into our Courtney building, because there's oftentimes transportation issues, they go out to the field, try to provide those services. So I went out with that team who knew a lot of the residents, and there's one guy who takes juniper limbs and makes walking sticks out of them. And then it's kind of hard to see, but there's like a handle, and then it's actually designed for him to lean on the stick. So I took this picture and I sent it to my daughter. My daughter's at the University of Oregon. She's studying product design. So she builds and makes things. And so I sent this to her and said, that's a pretty good design. Also, Central Oregon, we have, of course, hand washing stations that froze. At the beginning, the contractor was able to put salt in the water to prevent the freezing. With the more recent weather, even the salt couldn't keep it, so they would put out extra sanitizer, and then they also did some snow removal for us so that people could still access the stations, and it also helps with emergency egress should law enforcement or the fire department need to get into Juniper Ridge. There's several successes. There's also a lot that we learned, and there's also challenges ahead. But in terms of successes, we have a good start at cleaning up the land. We will go back to our Board of County Commissioners probably this month and report how many dumpsters of trash that we're able to remove. So we got a good start of cleaning up the land. The basic hygiene amenities are really appreciated by the people that live there, and prevent the problem from getting worse. And some people have moved out of homelessness. Now we can't say it's because of, we can't draw a cause and effect. We can't say because we went out and put basic hygiene, these people left homelessness, because there's several service providers that go out there each day or each week. But we know that one family moved into shelter. I met a person who was going to move into Central Oregon Villages, which is the tiny homes off of 27th and Bear Creek. He was getting ready to move, and that was a huge transition for him. And then recently in the Bend Bulletin, there was a story about Oasis Village, which is a tiny home village just southeast of Redmond. And there was a story of a family, I think it was a couple, and then they have an adult son, and they had left Juniper Ridge and moved up to Oasis Village. So there are some successes there. Challenges: we need more outdoor. We need some managed camp options. As I mentioned earlier, that even if we have the shelters are full, but even when there's an opening, not everybody will go. Sometimes it's based on not being able to live in a congregate setting. Sometimes it might be that the person owns an RV and they don't want to give that up, or they have maybe they have a dog and the shelter doesn't allow it for very justifiable reasons. When I went out and toured Juniper Ridge, I really realized, wow, people say, why, if you're homeless, why do you have a dog and spend money on food? Well, I realized it. I mean, the reasons are different, but one way to look at it is anybody have a dog right now? Family, right? So if somebody is homeless, why shouldn't they have a dog if I can have a dog? The other thing is I realized is dogs are good for warmth. I talked to one person and his dog was keeping him warm at night, and security and protection. If you walk away from your camp, stuff might get stolen, and so if you have a dog, that also is security. I'm not saying that obviously anybody who owns a dog needs to have responsible dog ownership. So another challenge is how long do we continue these basic services? We know how much it costs us per week, per month to provide those. It certainly feels good that we're doing it, but as a county, do we do this for infinity? At what point do we say, okay, we got to do something different? And our big challenge is the moment we made the decision not to relocate people, that prevented us from being able to solve all of the code violations, because the land use does not allow people to camp there. Simple as that. So we still have
What
some.
period of time are you talking about from when you got the code violations until you got all of the things set up there and cleaned up?
Yeah, the code violation came in the spring, and then we had those
Just
things out.
last spring?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then we had the amenities out in
Before
the summer.
Oh.
So what we had to do as a public agency is go out and do an RFP, get vendors to bid on them. We weren't sure if people would. You know, sometimes there's a perception. You know, the porta potties, we signed a contract. There was some discussion about would they get damaged? Would people relocate them closer to their camp? But ultimately the county signed a contract, so if they are damaged, we would pay the vendor for that. And there has not been any problems with the items out there. Yes?
Did you wanna wrap up before questions, cause if not, I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, let me wrap up and then we'll go to questions. The next slides, I'm just going to show you that they're there. I'm not going to walk through them, but this talks about the county's investments. And Deschutes County has spent millions of dollars investing in affordable housing, homelessness, all kinds of projects. So this is the county's investments in affordable housing. This is dollar investments and also land donations. It'll be in the slide that's published. This is more affordable housing investments. $7.8 million in ARPA funds, which is the money we got from the federal government during the pandemic. This is shelter support, the Bethlehem Inn. When I first started, the county and the city actually bought the Bethlehem Inn. It used to be the old Econo Lodge. Support for Central Oregon Veterans Village, which is located near the public safety campus. Other shelter support and services, Neighbor Impact Food Warehouse, $2.4 million from the county. That concludes my presentation, and happy to take questions.
So considering climate